I'm excited to be here in London at our second Brand Safety Summit here in this market and our fourth overall. This topic of brand safety and making brand safe digital investments continues to become critically important. And at the 614 Group, we are privileged to have the position to be at the center of the conversation, both as a content partner and with the clients that we work with. Our events are different because we handpick the folks to be here. We take a look at different parts of the industry, different roles of responsibility, and we handpick the folks that we think are going to be really critical to be part of this conversation.
Is viewability even still a problem? Is it still a thing?
Well, as a content provider, I mean, it's absolutely crucial that people can see the content that you're producing, and so therefore viewability is really important to us, from an advertising perspective, and it's really important that we're clear what that contract of agreement is between the buyer of our advertising space and and our position in that is to ensure that that meets the KPI. And I think everybody's talked a lot about KPIs and metrics and objectives, and that's absolutely what this boils down to. Is if you're going to produce something and you're going to serve something, then you need to ensure that it is agreed what that is going to be.
What do you think? Why would he say that? Is this the biggest disruption, or is this just a one in a series?
That's why it's an association with, the analogy with climate change is a good one, because you don't feel it today. That doesn't mean you don't recognise it,
right?
And I think the idea, the key difference with this is that it's kind of becoming institutionalized.
There's never been a greater attack, even the criminal underground with the fraudulent advertising, making millions of dollars a month off of our industry. So we have to continue to take a leadership position.
The most important session to me so far has been the one about making profit out of brand safety. A few times publisher side brought up the issue of whether media agencies such as mine would be willing to pay more for a better quality, say viewable inventory, which is quite an interesting discussion.
We're here today to talk about making money with brand safety. I suppose the question, certainly for me, as on the supply side and ad tech, is how do we get on the media plan?
Pricing will go up. I think that's something that clients are slowly starting to understand, that if you want more quality and you want less risk, then you have to be willing to pay for it. But if you're paying for it, you also want to see the results.
We all have a responsibility to stamp out ad fraud and make sure these brands are in the right environments.
The most important thing that companies really need to think about in relation to ad fraud is ensuring that everybody throughout their organisation understands firstly what it is, and therefore what behaviours or technologies they need to adopt in order to protect against it. And that's both on the client side of the organisation, but also with any of their suppliers or agency relationships.
The issue I have with the general marketplace that is kind of benchmarks of acceptability, that agencies, for example, going out to advertisers, their brands, their clients, and saying, guys, well done, we're still on par with our KPIs, your viewability is still roughly where it should be, around 45 to 50%. I mean, I don't think that's anywhere near good enough, first of all, but that's a completely different conversation. But the reality is advertisers and agencies and the sell side should be pushing the boundaries nearer to, if we look at fraud as a percentile, under 1%.
And I wonder if I can just stick my neck out at the end. So, I mean, thinking about the importance of this, I mean, it's self-evident. I mean, we have to solve this. We have to find a way forward. The reason I took the opportunity to chair this panel is because I think in my role, I wouldn't have a role unless we solve this. And actually, interestingly, I think anybody that benefits from advertising revenue, anybody in the food chain that benefits from advertising revenue has an obligation to sort it out. And therefore, if we're looking at ways of funding that, we should probably look to that group first. And that's probably all of us, actually, would be my view.
What's the next thing that's going to get legislated in the viewability? Is it ad blocking? Is it fighting ad fraud? Like what's on the horizon in digital in terms of policy and legislation? Is there something next on the horizon?
I think this is the biggest thing we're going to see for a while because it's huge. Everyone talks about data being the fuel of the digital advertising industry, and it's true. And this could completely change business models, viability of products, etc.
The law more will stay the same. It's the technology that changes and the way in which you apply existing law to new technology and new uses of technology. That's how I will look at it.
So we're going to see new laws for driverless cars, for example?
I think what we'll see is the GDPR that we've been talking about applying in a different context, in an Internet of Things thing, where you're advertising on not just a device, but on a pair of running shoes. So that's or a fridge.
Yeah, so sorry, I would say my last question, just so maybe it wasn't clear. So it applies to everybody. That was a point that was made. And so let's define everybody. So a measurement vendor, a DSP, an SSP, everybody who touches data in any way who might have been potentially protected underneath publishers is now directly has to comply where they didn't have to before?
Yep. Everyone. If anyone who's touching any data of any value, unless it's genuinely aggregated data that cannot be linked to any user in a very, very kind of high level.
I mean, I asked the ICO at a previous event a few weeks ago whether if you're an affiliate network and you're dropping a cookie just to count the sales so you get paid, is that personal data? And the answer was yes. So that gives you, for attribution and everything like that, gives you an idea of the scope of it.
Got it.
I like that it's a smaller, a bit more intimate event, great for networking and I'm really enjoying it so far. So I think the most important session of the day is still to come, and it's the session on fighting fraud. It's an industry-wide issue that needs to be addressed.
It's been really good. I think some of these summits get really, really big, and this one's nice enough to be, or small enough to actually meet the people that are of interest to you, so you can have a nice actual conversation.
I learned about viewability,
ad blocking,
how to make money from brand safe inventory,
EU data protection,
fighting frauds, ad blocking at the Brand Safety Summit.